Catherine Hall, or Kath Hall, I don't know if you prefer, who is a legal scholar from the Australian National University, specialized in transnational anti-corruption regulations and foreign regulations. And her talk will be entitled "Don't Forget the Whistleblowers: Challenges in Regulating for the Reporting of Corruption." Hi, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that all good?
Volume's good.
Excellent. Do you hear it? Great. Okay. Firstly, I'm not just going to talk about whistleblowing. I'm going to talk about some broader themes, and that's partly because of where I've been for the last 2 days, and also because of the nature of this forum. So for the last 2 days, I've been at the OECD, at an International Bar Association anti-corruption conference, and it's a fabulous event. It's very intense. There's a lot of discussion. At it are legal practitioners, regulators, international organisations, compliance professionals, and so on. And I'll just say something about why that is an interesting combination. But that has prompted me to want to add a few things to my talk today. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to talk for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to open up for questions. So firstly, a little bit about me. So I am a transnational, technically called a transnational anti-corruption legal expert. But what that means is that I am actually, my background is as a corporate lawyer and a corporate law expert, but I've lived on and off in Asia for the last 20 years, including in jurisdictions such as Indonesia, Mongolia, the Philippines, and more recently working in Myanmar, Burma. I also did my PhD, so I'm so sympathetic to a lot of the legal scholars don't do PhDs, but it's now the common thing, and I was kind of at the crossover point. And I am so sympathetic with those of you who do PhDs. I did mine on the psychology of corporate misconduct. So that psychological element has been incredibly helpful in my perspective on corruption. And once I finished my PhD, what I found was that, although I didn't know it, I'm actually quite a rare beast. I have quite a rare combination of perspectives, because a lot of legal academics come at corruption from a criminal perspective. I come at it from a corporate perspective. I've lived in Asia. I have a behavioural focus. And so what I found is that I've actually been involved in quite a lot of work over the last 5 years in particular, as things have really taken off in the international space, on corruption. And I've been asked to work with a number of different organisations. I'm currently, for example, I'm just telling you this because it displays the way that corruption is spreading, and the sort of overlap, particularly between international organisations, private practitioners, development agencies, regulators, and so on. So, for example, I'm currently on the International Standards Association Expert Committee. We just drafted the management standard on anti-corruption and bribery systems, which is now being adopted by countries as the best practice standard for foreign and local companies on anti-corruption, anti-bribery systems. So Singapore, Brazil, Peru, I think have already adopted it. Siemens, and IBM, Microsoft. So that's the sort of intersection between and on that committee were representatives from the World Bank. So there's this real overlap with regulators and so on. So as an academic, that's the sort of work that I really enjoy. I meet with regulators quite often. There's a group of 5 regulators that they're called Five Eyes, which I think is kind of funny. It sounds like a little board. So to me, it sounds like a little kids club, but it's really serious. It's the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and they meet and they kind of share intel. And they're now doing the same on corruption investigations against corporations. So I meet with them. I've done work with Transparency International. So this overlap between public and private, between international organisations, between lawyers. This is really compliance professionals, executives. It's really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. So I'm going to say a few words at the beginning about where I think that's coming from and how I think that's framed in the discussion on corruption. And that's the context in which I'm going to discuss whistleblowing and then very quickly big things. Because these are 2 areas that are currently not big in this sort of global discussion on corruption. So I have to admit, the first time I went to the International Bar Association conference, I was pretty sceptical. I thought you get a bunch of boys in the room and they're all going to be pretty much often I thought they'd be anti-enforcement, pro-client. And that attitude has really changed. And what I found is that, at least amongst a wide range of the professionals who are dealing with the large multinationals, they're very much about encouraging them to adopt preventative compliance programs. And they can be cynical about this. There's a huge market in it now for law firms to advise on compliance, not just on regulation and enforcement and so on. So there is self-interest, but they've actually become, if you like, informal regulators. They go out and spread the word to large corporations on what they should be doing. A message that in the past perhaps regulators and governments were the main sort of spreading. So I was pretty cynical the first time I went along to one of these meetings, and I guess you'd know the sort of reasons I was cynical, because really we know that the issue of corruption has hit the government, international organisation, academic and other list of priority areas over the last 25 to 30 years, really because of its intersection with globalisation and its intersection with foreign investment and its intersection with the interests of the largest economies in the world. In other words, we've had corruption. It's traditionally been treated as a domestic, a national state issue. It's become a global issue because, and I'm not being cynical here, this is a statement of fact, because there has been concern about how corruption erodes or undermines the process of globalisation. And so the concern has been more about globalisation rather than political stability and development. And the focus has been more on corruption as a source of economic risk rather than corruption as for the implications it has in domestic economies. We're talking sort of 30 years ago when the focus shifted globally to corruption as an important issue. Now that doesn't mean that's still where the debate is, but realising how corruption was framed in essentially political terms, in economic terms, sometimes in moral terms, so that's become less in favour. I think it's really important to understand what's missing out of the discussion and that there are big gaps still in the discussion around corruption. Though I think that's slowly changing, and I think that's a very positive thing. So you just have to realise, though, that in the 1990s and the 2000s, when most of the work on corruption was coming out of the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, you were going to get the sort of research that focused on economic implications for states, for corporations, for development, but primarily focused on economic implications, the effect of corruption on, as I said, foreign investment, domestic economic growth, development, competition. So we had very much an economic framework. And that, I think one of the things that did was it resulted in a convergence of academic, public policy, corporate and government perspectives on corruption, which was largely focused on economic outcomes, even as we know in the development context, the World Bank and IMF were strongly pushing the economic consequences of corruption, the negative economic consequences. But, and this is a big but, I think over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a couple of shifts. Now, I'm not saying we've seen shifts that have completely balanced that approach, but I think we've seen shifts. I think, firstly, some of these shifts have come about through one big shift is the increased focus on the supply side, not just on the demand side. So this is where I come in, the increased focus on corporates and their role, particularly large globals, their multinationals, their role in corruption, but also down on the ground, corporates' role in the domestic context. And this is also, we see this through increased enforcement of the FCPA. There's many new corporate foreign bribery laws, UK, France, Brazil, China. We see a much stronger regulatory focus on deterrence and then on good compliance, on good behaviour. And we also see, as I said before, an increased coordination amongst regulators to actually police global corporations. So this is a shift in that narrative, but still, I think that there's still certain things that haven't changed, whereas there's certain things things that have changed. So I think there is still a strong link underlying a lot of the discussion on corruption with its impact on globalisation, its impact on economic growth within countries. That is linked with the discussion on democracy, but again, because that's seen as a proxy for a more stable political environment for foreign investment. So we still see, as I said, a focus on the global effects of corruption, or the effects of corruption on globalisation. We still see a focus on bribery as the main form of corruption that is regulated. I think whilst we've seen a shift from the moralistic and political focus on, or narrative on corruption, the economic and what we call in the legal now the compliance or governance focus still dominate. They're still the predominant now discussions, and I'm going to make a point on how limiting that economic analysis can be at the end with one point. So perhaps you can let me know when I've got like 2 or 3 things. Great. But we have things that have shifted. We've seen an increased focus on corporate social responsibility. We've seen a link with more areas like money laundering, beneficial ownership, modern slavery, human trafficking, terrorism. So we've seen an expansion. And this is the one that I find particularly encouraging. We're now seeing an increased concern about corruption, not just from the big global institutions or governments in terms of foreign investment, but we're seeing it coming from consumers, from investors in companies that are saying, we don't want you to be engaging in this behaviour, or if you do, we're going to take action against you. I think we see it from citizens, we see it in uprisings that we're seeing, the sort of protests that we're seeing around the world still. The media, I think we are seeing companies actually overtly more concerned about not engaging in corruption. And so I think this is a really positive shift, which I think is very encouraging for the future of how we're going to tackle corruption and who's involved in it. But before I talk about my 2 areas of whistleblowers and victims, does anyone want to tell me who's left out of this framework that I've just described, of who's concerned and what motivates? Does anyone want to pitch in and make any comment about who's left out? No? I'm going to suggest to you that whistleblowers and victims are 2 groups that are left out. Whistleblowers is those who report. I mean, they're not the only ones, and you can add to that list, but these are the 2 I'm going to raise. Whistleblowers we haven't yet really come to terms with, and by whistleblowers, it's a very clumsy term. I'm not a fan of it, but it is a shorthand term still that is accepted for somebody who speaks up about wrongdoing, and often makes themselves vulnerable by speaking up about something beyond their own wrongdoing just to them, some sort of systemic public interest corporate wrongdoing. And victims, I think, are still left out of the debate, the discussion, the reform, the remedies, and so on. Okay, so whistleblowers. Now, I don't need to tell you, you're from a range of countries, I don't need to tell you why the word whistleblower is not a good one. It has tended in the past to be associated with citizen informers, so people who will report on their neighbours, their family, the people they live with, to an authority, often a repressive authority. So it's not a good word, but the reality is that whistleblowers, those who do report wrongdoing, are absolutely essential to changing practices on corruption, both to enforcement and to attitudes that it's okay to speak up. And that's because of the secret nature of corruption. You usually need someone who's close to it, who sees it, to speak up for whatever form of remediation to happen. So the point I want to make about whistleblowing is that I want to make 3 points about, firstly, how whistleblowing has become important, but how it's not being picked up in the debate. So it's in the sort of shift from seeing whistleblowers as citizen informers. There's been 3 things that have influenced it. One is we've realised that whistleblowers, or people who report, are actually central to organisational effectiveness. They're central to any group effectiveness, is that you have somebody who's willing to speak up when there's significant wrongdoing. And that's been particularly, take it out of the public sector context into organisations. That's been a real a real change in narrative to say actually whistleblowers are motivated employees, they're not disgruntled employees, they're not unhappy with what's going on, they're trying to make something good happen out of what's going on. So that change in narrative has been a very important part of whistleblowers, the attitudes changing. Secondly, there's a whole body of research on the motivations of whistleblowers. So from sort of the 80s, 90s onwards, we've had two big researchers, Michele and Nia, who've done a whole range of psychological research on whistleblowers, shown that their motivations are usually intrinsically good, positive, that they've shown that they experience retaliation. So that whole discussion now of whistleblowing has been strongly informed by a focus on the individual and their experience. But again, that hasn't helped us regulate it. The third big change, though, is we've now seen it be realised, coming to this sort of globalisation focus, that whistleblowing is a central part of tackling corruption in any context. And certainly as part of the global effort to tackle corruption, we need whistleblowing reform. We need laws to protect them, and we need laws to encourage them. So there's, now the OECD's published 5 guides on it. We've seen G20 countries all being forced to implement it, blah, blah, blah. So it's definitely moved up the importance scale, but the question is what's happening? And I'm going to tell you that sadly we're still on the edge of things happening. Very little is happening at the moment. I think we'll see a major shift on this, and I hope that one of the major shifts we'll see is in the language, but also in the moving away from the focus on the individual whistleblower to a focus on the value of the information they bring forward, and then on investigation and remedy. So I'm hoping, just as a broad brush approach, that we see a shift from focusing on the person to a focus on protecting the person, but over here dealing with their information, investigation and resolution. And I'm hoping we see this at a global level. And just to give you an example of why I'm optimistic about this, I was 2 weeks ago in Quebec for an International Standards Association meeting on developing a global standard on whistleblowing, something that a lot of governments aren't doing. And I was amazed because in the room were represent delegates from China and Japan and the UAE and India and I could keep going. A whole range of countries that I might not have thought were wanting to be proactive around this. Indonesia, a whole range of, and it's because even though they lack the laws, they know they have to change that, and one way they're going to do that is actually by bringing in a private standard and making that the law. So I'm not going to say any more on that, but I think we've still got a way to go. We've really quite a way to go on. So the last point is about victims. Victims are at the moment out of the picture, and I think this is something that we absolutely have to change. The legal regime for victims, so when I talk about victims, there are obviously a whole range. You have shareholders in companies, they're going to start taking action, but you have competitor companies, consumers, but most importantly you have citizens of overseas jurisdictions, and then you have the most vulnerable, which are the people that are trafficked, or who are whose, for example, trafficking is highly dependent on corruption. And it's these victims that they're the most vulnerable victims that there are no remedies for. The legal framework is very impoverished, it's a mess. And so I think in terms of seeing actions here, I just want to raise a couple of key points that are on the horizon with victims. The first one is we have to sort out the law, and we really haven't, and there are some possibilities there, but I can talk about those. The second one is we have to think about who represents victims, because the most vulnerable in these communities are not sitting at the table when companies are settling disputes, or when assets are being returned, so we have to think about who represents victims and get away from the fact that a lot of professionals are de facto representatives at the moment, and that's not how it should be. The third thing we have to work out is how to distribute the money, and that is a real problem in corruption. Of course, you risk when you're going to a regime either exacerbating or at least having some of the money, but there are options. I'm not positive there are options about it. And the last point I'd like to make, and this is absolutely my last point, this was where I said I'd return to the economic analysis. There's one group of victims that we haven't as yet brought into the debate at all, and so I'm going to tell you about them and then I'm going to finish, because this group of victims, once you realise who they are, it's so obvious that they should be part of our understanding of victims. and that is that the primarily economic analysis of corruption makes us see bribes in terms of economic money, an economic favour, an economic gift, an economic advantage. What we don't see and what we haven't seen is the invisibility of sex as a form of bribe. So it is, once you take off the lens of the economic analysis of bribes, there is actually a whole range of cases out there, of evidence out there that shows that very often what's demanded by a public official, particularly in certain jurisdictions, is not money for access to children, for children to go to school, access to healthcare, immigration papers. It's not money, it's sex. And so we have a group of vulnerable people out there who are actually, and it fits within our definition of bribery when you think about it, it's an advantage, but they're at the moment invisible. And so this is, again, one of our most vulnerable groups that, when you look at the evidence, are overwhelmingly part of the corruption scenario, but at the moment are invisible because of the economic focus on financial bribes and financial advantages. So that's it.
Thank you very much for that talk, touching upon a subject that is still, I think, understudied if I see what people work on here, and that's what I know from our research. So thank you so much. So let's open the floor for questions and discussions. A lot of people. Okay, so tell me.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions as a corporate, to you as a corporate lawyer. One question about the anti-money laundering issue. For example, you are working as a corporate lawyer, so of course, for example, in Europe, of course, anti-money laundering directive also regulates law firm accounting office to report. It's also one of the really difficult regulations because also conflict of interest, also confidentiality to the client. So a lot of difficulty in terms of implementation. What can be needed further to strengthen the directive, also implement this first question? Second question about whistleblower protection. In your almost all of the country have whistleblower protection in somehow consistent this year. But also the system of whistleblower protection is so different. So it's also scope of the what is whistleblowing and what can be protected, what measure can be done. It's so varying. So I'm looking at more Irish model, and also it's one of the good example, but also like bona fide report, what the extent of the anonymous report, and also it's really controversial. How we can done in the advanced commission writing draft to make more member states with the protection system. I'm wondering how we have to formulate this kind of unified protection system.
Okay, so I'll just repeat those so you can hear that. The first question was on money laundering, and I have to admit I'm not an expert on money laundering, and what I do know is that the regime, whilst actually stronger in its terms, is very poorly implemented. And I think a large part of that is lack of enforcement of money laundering laws. But we are seeing again a shift globally because a number of jurisdictions are being very concerned about return of assets. And money laundering and return of assets go hand in hand. But at the moment, I could easily point you in the direction of a number of discussions of gaps in money laundering laws. But it's certainly on the horizon. So I think in that sense, it's certainly up there compared to whistleblowing. Now, the issue of whistleblowing, and I should clarify, most jurisdictions have whistleblowing laws for people who report on public officials. And that's because of the idea of public interest and integrity of office and so on. Where there is a huge gap globally is for people who report on corporate, organisational, NGO, any other sort of conduct other than involving a public official. And we absolutely need to bring that under the umbrella. I think that there are actually a number of groups that are working on this, so I think we are going to see both law reform, but for me, the really interesting thing is that you'd be familiar with this. We know that legally the anti-corruption framework sits at the international level through the primary treaties of the UN Treaty and the OECD Treaty, along with regional treaties. And we know that ultimately what that does is require states to implement laws. And what the really interesting thing is through that review process of states that occurs by the OECD and the UN, and the UN treaty is signed up by, I think it's 164 countries, so it's globally very pervasive. That review mechanism is very powerful. It means that your buddies or other countries come in. I mean, imagine being peer reviewed. You get another country come in and they determine a scorecard for you against the convention. And one of the key things that is part of our peer review are countries' whistleblower laws. So that is increasing pressure on countries across the world, peer pressure. And it's very embarrassing. Australia got a very negative review from the OECD in 2014. We're changing so many laws because we're horrified about having our hands slapped again so publicly internationally for our poor laws, including whistleblowers. In terms of what changes will be implemented, the OECD, the Basel Group on Governance, the International Standards Association, we're all looking at best practice. So I think we're going to see a big jump in our understanding. Even the UN is looking at best practice. So I think we're going to see a big jump in our understanding of what the best practice way to regulate this area is. And one of it is get rid of the word whistleblower.
Thank you very much for the talk. Given that you have a background in psychology, I'd like to ask you 3 questions relating to
Wow, great.
Yeah, the first one is that there is a paper. The very first one is you said we need to change the wording on whistleblowers. Very straightforward question would be, do you know a better term?
I actually don't think it matters. I think the main thing is look, the problem with getting away from whistleblowing is you go from a highly emotive term to something that's going to be totally bland, like, corporate reporting or, corporations are already doing this. They have speak up hotlines, and I think you're going from something which everyone understands but which is highly emotive to something that is very neutral. In the end, I don't think it matters. I think we could come up with a dozen terms that all say the same sort of thing. Integrity reporter, it doesn't matter. What we have to get away from is whistleblowing is highly emotive, firstly because of its history, but secondly because of the psychological element. So we, as anyone who's looked into psychology would know, loyalty is a fundamental human need. It's not just a social need, it's a human need. We're motivated to be part of a group and to feel both loyal to that group and that group loyal to us. So as soon as somebody does something which is perceived as disloyal, we can have a very emotional response to that of betrayal. So whistleblowing is a topic that's emotive, let alone having a word that's emotive. So in the end, I don't think it matters. We have to be countering, or actually, as we've talked about in the earlier session, reframing some of the discussion to actually bring in concepts of loyalty. That maybe a whistleblower may not be seen as loyal to that work group that they're reporting on, but they're loyal to the organisation, or they're loyal to society, or they're loyal to their own values, a larger goal. So I think it's reframing.
Right, yeah, that was basically my second question, because there is this paper on the loyalty fairness trade-off, and I think one of their suggestions is to frame fairness as a higher loyalty, right? Like just what you said, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, whether this has been done successfully somewhere.
Okay, I'll answer that quickly because I know there's other people who want to ask questions. But the thing that's really interesting is how you frame loyalty depends on the context. So I've lived in Indonesia, and I know there's some people in the room from Indonesia, but you've got to frame loyalty in a social context as well as possibly a group context. I think the social context is really important. So we tend to be very individualistic. It might be that, so if I flip it on the other side, framing loyalty to family or country can be more powerful in some contexts than in others. Similarly, framing loyalty to self, to an organisation can be less powerful. So it very much depends on the context of it. So we have to be flexible with our notion of loyalty.
Yeah, thanks, Kath, for that great presentation, and I really appreciate the focus on whistleblowers. There's whistleblowers and there's whistleblowers, and I wonder about the politicisation of whistleblowers. Now, Julian Assange, whistleblowers around the global financial crisis, initially anyway, this might have happened subsequently that I'm not aware of, Transparency International and other anti-corruption agencies usually come out publicly and support these kind of whistleblowing initiatives, right? And although saying whistleblowing is important, they can support certain whistleblowing. I was wondering if you could talk about the politics of who is a whistleblower and how you kind of don't know, muddle through to support the good whistleblowers and bad whistleblowers, or we should be doing that?
So there's two parts to that I would comment. Firstly is I think we do have to separate the person out. It really shouldn't matter who the person is if the information is valuable. And that's actually what we should be focusing on, the value of the information, not the motives, the history, the nature. But you see, it's so easy to undermine what whistleblowers do by focusing on the individual. You can easily discredit them, and it's a technique. It's an easy way to undermine information you don't want out there. We've seen it with Unoil, with Panama Papers. You discredit the source, you discredit the information. So as just a technique, I think we have to be really strict in separating those two out. But you're absolutely right that there are so many contradictions in whistleblowing, but the contradiction that emerges for me from cases like Julian Assange and so on is that most of our international organisations that are speaking up on corruption and that are seemingly proactive, including Transparency International, still believe inherently in the value of the state. The state is still very important in this scenario. So when you have someone who's actually blowing in or revealing information which is really undermining the role of the state or the power of the state, that's attention for it may not be attention for some groups, but it's attention for other groups. So you're absolutely right. I think there are contradictions. However, I think that we can start to get clearer on those contradictions when we take the individual out of the picture.
My question I perceive advice from you because I also work on policy initiatives on this issue. Recently Nigeria has reported, I don't know whether you are aware of this, some success as a result of the whistleblower policy, about almost $1 million, about $100 million were recovered within the span of 2 months, and several other policies because the government has. However, despite the success story, we have also inundated with the fact that the victims, those who solicited those information, never get protection because the country does not have a law of whistleblower protection. And it has a very great impact on the rights person. Now, the country or the government have divided opinion. Oh, let's really define based on the issue you are saying. My thing is just to ask whether what do you think the government can do with the right, because the parliament is yet to pass the law of whistleblower.
Okay. I absolutely 100% believe we need whistleblower protection. I have absolutely no doubt about that because the overwhelming evidence, and this is where the research that's been done in social psychology, and law has shown overwhelmingly the vast majority of whistleblowers suffer detrimental action. So I think we absolutely need protection. We can't leave that out of the law. And we've got to get it right too. It's much more complicated than just saying once you report, you're protected. Often whistleblowers need protection before they report, when they're sort of floating there to talk to colleagues. I'm part of a large research project in Australia. At the moment, we're the largest one because we're looking at public, private, and not-for-profit whistleblowing in practice. And what we know is that protection is it's a much more sophisticated concept. But we're not without examples. I mean, in the employment context, protection in the context of sexual harassment, bullying, a range of other unsafe work practices, we've actually made some progress there. So we're not starting with a blank slate, but yes, protection is absolutely vital. But I believe the law also needs to deal with issues such as reporting, the reporting of whistleblower cases, investigation and outcome. And that's whether it's public or private sector. And that's what whistleblower laws haven't tended to do. They've just focused on protection and some cases reward for information, but that's a very controversial issue. Can you speak up a bit? Just a little bit. Sorry, the fans in the ear.
I'm from Ukraine and I'm a research whistleblower protection group. And right now, the Ukrainian parliament is considering the whistleblower protection. build. So, and actually we really combine the best standards and practice, and even one of the experts from OECD told us, guys, we do want it because the politician is so and actually we have two deep discussions around this draft. First, and it's my question, first, should whistleblower have the choice to choose channels to it,
that's a good
external or internal? Because right now in our draft law we clearly says that yes, he can he need to have choice.
Yeah.
And the second question is about this is money, like 10%. Yeah, and this is like big debates around this. What is your opinion?
Okay, so this is just my opinion. On the second one, it's just my opinion. On the first one, it's absolutely necessary to have channels of reporting. In other words, it's shown that the overwhelming majority of whistleblowers will first try and report internally to a manager, someone up the chain. However, the problem is that if they're part of the problem, that's not going to go anywhere. So you need to give hotlines, various forms of options. I mean, I don't think the option should be limited. The big question which is out there though is, should you allow external reporting? Should you allow reporting to the media? And there's very divided opinions on that, because in the US it's possible for whistleblowers to go straight outside the organisation. They don't ever have to report internally. Now, best practice should require, we believe in Australia in our research, that the best practice should require internal reporting unless those that you'd be reporting to are part of the problem. And then external is allowed. And the reason why is because overwhelmingly that although our research shows the vast majority of whistleblowers don't ever go outside the company, the vast majority report internally, and either it does get dealt with and they stop, or it does get dealt with. But that threat that someone can go outside the organisation creates an incredible incentive for an organisation, whether public or private, government or not, to deal with it properly inside. It's an incredibly powerful incentive. So even though it might sit at the top and be rarely used, we believe it's incredibly important to make internal processes work. On the issue of rewards and bounties and all of the rest, look, opinions really divided. My personal view is though that if you have a system where compensation is really thoroughly done, compensation for future loss of income, compensation for psychological harm as well as economic harm, then I think a really comprehensive compensation scheme is appropriate. The problem with it is though that under current regimes you have to have suffered a harm before you get compensation. In other words, what happens in the US is you don't have to have suffered a harm, you just have to report and then you get a reward. So I think we have to deal with at what point and how that so-called compensation kicks in. Do you have to prove that you have suffered and retaliated against, or should you be able at the same time as you report to have issues of compensation or restitution dealt with separately before you have to actually prove a harm? That's a bit problematic, but it's not impossible to resolve.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. The issue of whistleblowing currently is tackled at the level of regulation.
Yeah.
So what we're dealing with, what we're talking about is the passing of laws, some legislative mechanisms to protect this. Recently in Azerbaijan, a couple months ago, we have passed this legislation of whistleblowers. And we have been applying this legislation and protecting these people reporting through external channels, from harassment, from employees. We even have a chance to make arrangement that this person is not sacked from the position to serve a period of time. But in reality, the society has a very negative opinion about whistleblowers. I mean, it's not a problem of Azerbaijan. It's a global problem. We may enjoy watching movies about whistleblowers, But when it comes to employing this person,
Yeah.
you request whether I get to employ this person or not because you can prove that to me.
Yeah.
As an employer. So my question is, similar to the ethical issues, don't you think it's along these legislative changes we actually need to make bigger differences on these soft and regulated instruments, maybe ethical rules, because if you look at the most famous ethical principles, moral principles, you will see that people need to report when something is going wrong. And if you look at other principles, you won't find it there. I think instead of this making a formal stand by the public representatives, members of the government, what more valuable would be to kind of reach out to society to get this something.
Look, in an ideal world, I agree. If we could get social change in attitudes to people who speak up, I mean, we've just had a huge inquiry in Australia, and it's a very difficult topic, but into organisational sexual abuse. And if people had spoken up, or if those who'd spoken up had been listened to, that's an example where whistleblowing just didn't work, and socially that was shut down. And if we could change social attitudes, absolutely. I think it's a hard one though for the sort of reasons that I spoke about before, because not only do we have there are emotive issues. Personally, there are often social attitudes. We have one in Australia which is you don't dog on your mate. And that comes from our history of sort of mateship. But you find many societies have these inbuilt rules. So the thing about law is, this is an example, I think, of law being necessary for social change. If we could, it's not alone, and we have to work on the social change and the social norms, but here law is actually, regulators, international organisations are bringing it to the fore. And through that, I'll give you an example. So in this large research project I'm involved in, it's for academics, and then it's a range of external organisations, corporate regulators, government, so we're doing it collectively. When we first started this, the corporate regulator came in and was like this, the representative, and said, every report we get is from a disgruntled employee. Like, we don't really care about whistleblowers. Through the process of just learning more, this person, but the organisation has completely changed its stance. It is now positively speaking about whistleblowers in the media, to organisations, at forums. So I'm a believer that you do need. Now, that ASIC, our regulator, had to be involved because the government had got in trouble and the corporations were getting in trouble. So I believe that in this instance, knowledge is everything. Knowledge, information, realising our biases, realising the role in all of that, and ethics, values, all essential. But I believe law is a huge part of creating that change.
In the country I know best, my home country, Sweden, it is in the constitutional law very illegal for any person in a managerial position, private or public, to try to search after the source, who is the whistleblower.
Yeah.
And this person also had the right to be anonymous. If the journalist says something, that's actually constitutional. It's very serious. I'm not an expert in this, but I think this has an enormous effect. Everyone with a managerial position knows that anyone in your organization can go to the media, and you cannot even try. If you would send out an email, who said this? You're gone.
Yeah. Well, look, absolutely. Anonymity is an essential. There are two parts: anonymity and then confidentiality. So anonymity is about being able to disclose without revealing who you are, and maybe go through a whole process. Sometimes through companies or organisations can actually create email boxes and so on. So you can. There are techniques there, but then confidentiality, even if you do disclose, is the second element. But do you know that the UK has that law as well, that you cannot find out, it's not in the constitutional law, And recently, I can't think of the company that it was, but it was a large multinational. Who was it? Barclays. Now, who was it in Barclays who tried the managing director. Now, who better should know that you can't do this? But the managing director, and it's this emotive response. Who is it? Who said it? I have to know. But again, we can change attitudes on that. We actually can. So I mean, it's a slow process, and I absolutely agree. Anonymity, confidentiality are best practice. But then we have to still recognise the human tendency to want to circumvent that, and therefore we have to increase our awareness of the value, the inherent value of information, as opposed to categorising it in a sense of disloyalty.
It seems it's a constitutional law.
Yeah.
No manager survives this.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
the end of your career.
And that's great, but I don't think many countries are going to put it in their constitution. Can I just say this though?
You said law was important, so that's why
Anybody who is looking though, or who is please, the majority of laws that you say exist will only exist for public sector whistleblowers. And the two big areas that are not covered, corporate or organisational and not for profit. Imagine your NGOs where you are not protected to speak up. So
I think you had one last. We can take two last questions, then we move on to the next. Sorry.
Two questions about implementation of support
sorry, was there a question up the back? Sorry, I just noticed that there's some people who haven't asked a question yet. Was there a question up there?
A question in the front.
Okay, sorry. You might have been waving. Okay.
Yeah. Two short questions about implementation of the protection law. I found it to be difficult. I don't say that anything, I don't want to be biased. One of the difficulty of this protection is first, citizen doesn't trust the state, so there is a covered system doesn't really function properly. The first issue. Second issue is that, especially small countries, people based on community-based society are really hard to use this law protection because people can identify so easily. So how we can just kind of overcome
Okay, I'll just say this, I won't go through it all, but there are people working on this and making really good suggestions on ways that it can be dealt with. So absolutely there are challenges. It's a challenge where there's a lack of trust, and it's a challenge where it is still possible to identify this. But for example,
Last you were saying that laws pertaining to the private sector. The FCPA was initiated for reform practices that was specifically for the corporate sector to be able to, and it was also a push by the private sector to do. And the EU law also has, it's both governing corporate and that's a criminal thing. Both EU officials, but also big corporate.
Yeah.
So those two regulations seem to be, but I mean, there's and EU is an important body which still has the power to enforce on like international conventions. So, I mean, would you think that it needs to be more detailed and more specifically aimed at the private sector?
No. So generally, corruption and the supply side of bribes the focus on it has escalated in the last 10 years. So the FCPA Act was introduced in 1977 in the context of Watergate. Moral issues, social outrage, political outrage, and so on. But it sat dormant until the US got the OECD on side and said, let's get everyone involved. So but really again, it was that, I believe it's that peer review mechanism that happens within the OECD convention where they go around regularly and say, what are you doing? The same as with the UN convention. That has dramatically increased the focus on the supply side. But the other thing that's done it is now we have under the Bribery Act and the FCPA, and we're getting it in other jurisdictions, strict liability for corporations if anyone in their supply chain or contractor engages in bribery. And then there's the defence of adequate procedures. This has made corporations not sit back and go, well, I'll wait till somebody finds out and enforces it. Suddenly they go, we have to have this in place in case somebody finds out. So corporations have come on board because they know they can't wait to get caught and then plead. They've got to show they had something in place. So the combination of corporates coming on board, lawyers seeing a market in it, professionals now seeing a market in it and spruiking it, plus some pretty serious enforcement, plus the existence of laws, means we are getting a lot more action on the supply side. So if I suggested there wasn't, that there's definitely action happening there. Could we have more?
Okay, so thank you very much, Kath, for